In the 2000s, a visual aesthetic started to become popular. Kids' horror films. Ever since The Nightmare Before Christmas was released in 1993, it proved to be a style of filmmaking that works. In 2012, a film in this style was released named ParaNorman. Unlike the competition of Corpse Bride and Monster House, ParaNorman had a lot to say. When it comes to these specific movies, the visuals are everything. From ghosts to zombies, and even a living house that's a monster. The story doesn't matter to these movies much, but it is shallow and comes secondary to visuals. There are two movies that are from this era of filmmaking that are different. ParaNorman and Coraline. I already made one breaking down Coraline, so watch that after this. ParaNorman is special for two very different reasons. Firstly, we have very lovable characters. From Norman himself, to Neil, to even Alvin the bully. There is no bad character in this movie, and that's what makes it so interesting to watch. The second reason is what makes this movie easy to revisit as an adult. ParaNorman is social commentary disguised as a kids' movie. What the movie is commenting on is something that we refuse to talk about in this day of age. Bigotry. When you first start this movie, you notice something very interesting about our main character, Norman. The movie opens on a shot of him watching a horror movie with his grandmother, who happens to be dead. Yes, Norman can see dead people in this movie. This causes a very interesting family dynamic for our young Norman, who is 11 years old. His father is dismissive and doesn't listen to him, and his sister is a shallow teenage girl. His mom is the only one who consistently defends him and shows him unconditional love. His dad often makes jokes about his son, which makes Norman feel isolated. The town they live in is Blythe Hollow, with a very old legend. The entire thematics of their town was built on the witch trials, and they created legends and myths about it. There is a rumored witch's curse, which is as follows. Every year on Halloween night, the dead shall rise and start attacking the townsfolk. No one believes that this curse is real, of course, because it has never happened before. One day, when Norman is walking with his friend Neil, he gets a surprise visit from his great-uncle, Mr. Prendergast. His uncle tells him that this witch's curse is real, and only Norman is able to prevent it from wreaking havoc on the town. In order to stop the curse, he has to read a book at the witch's grave. Norman doesn't believe this, of course, until his uncle shows up to him in the school bathroom, but as a ghost. His uncle has died, making Norman the only person alive who can save the town. Norman gets the book from his uncle's dead hands and goes off to find the grave of the witch. On his way there, however, he runs into complications. His bully from school, Alvin, steals the book from him. This means Norman was not able to read the book by sunset, which was the deadline. As soon as the sun goes down, we see hands come up from the ground. Zombies rise from the dead, scaring both Norman and Alvin. They get into town, with zombies only a few feet behind them. This triggers the survival instincts of the townsfolk, who turn to mob violence. In this time, we learn that the zombies were the original judges and eyewitnesses from the trial that condemned the witch to death. Norman is able to talk to them, so he does. First, he throws books at them out of anger from how evil they are. In this time, we learn who the witch was. An 11-year-old Agatha Prendergast. She was a child, yet they killed her. Norman is disgusted by what the zombies did, but he talks to them instead of hurting them. They say they only did it because they were scared of her. We would see infinite division and harm caused by bigots. Of course, those things do happen, but not at the scale we would actually see it if it was purely hatred. I believe that bigotry is more complicated than that. It usually stems from lack of understanding. With different cultures, it's easy to not understand those who aren't like you. I don't believe the Spanish settlers hated the people in the Americas. They just didn't understand them. When it comes to bigotry, it is usually a fear of someone disguised as hatred. You usually don't hate what you understand, for the most part. It is what you don't understand that you form a prejudice against. ParaNorman is one of the few movies to tackle this issue, and it does it perfectly for kids to understand it. Now that we've defined bigotry, it begs the question, where does it come from? We have established that it is not purely hate-based. If it doesn't stem from hate, then where does it actually originate? It stems from lack of understanding. If you don't understand something, you are most likely going to treat it as different than you treat things that you understand. It comes from a fear of the unknown. As humans, our nature is to get anxious and fearful of things we don't know. It's like as a people, we are scared of those different from us because we don't know their culture. Therefore, we don't know how they would react to us or if they could harm us. It stems from a survival tactic. ParaNorman shows this in a very interesting way. Norman in the film is very alienated from the people around him, but it's not for the reasons you would think. It's not because he is a bad person or he's dangerous, but because he's different. He says he can see ghosts, and they don't really understand that. This makes them hate him and shun him out of preservation of self. The same is applied to the townspeople and judges of Agatha's time. They didn't persecute her because they were horrible monsters, but scared human beings. Did they make a horrible decision? Absolutely. But they did it because they were afraid she would do something similar to them. All of this is just a hurricane of a cycle that just keeps moving the herd around, never really stopping or disrupting. Up to this point, a clear theme is developing. That is, hurt people hurt people. This is a very common phrase, but I don't think people actually break it down and look at what it really means. In this context, it is very clear. The reaction of someone who has been hurt is to take it out on others, whether that be verbally or physically. This is where we see the victim become the aggressor. They have an "I'll show them" mentality. There's a character in ParaNorman that is the embodiment of that statement, that being Agatha. After being persecuted by the judges and townspeople, she lashes out at them with violence. Her immediate reaction to being wronged was to wrong those who wronged her. She was angry, so she took it out on other people. Some people might say it is good to get vengeance on those who harm you, but for the most part that is wrong. The cycle of hatred doesn't care who is right or wrong. Innocent people get caught in the eye of it. It keeps circling around every single person, and it will lash out whenever it decides to. In the eyes of the persecuted, every act of retaliation is justified beyond measure. Most people only look at people through their actions instead of their intentions. It is this little detail that keeps the cycle alive. If you go action for action, eye for an eye, then there is no cease to the violence that would be caused. Some people might be confused about the stance I'm taking, and that is okay. Let me spell it out more clearly. Retaliation never works. When it comes to retaliation, the instinct is very natural for humans. When we feel wronged, we want to right that wrong. In our shallow and selfish hearts, the way to do that is to cause pain to others, mainly the ones who hurt us originally. This creates the cycle of endless hurt, which helps nothing and only radicalizes people. Until violence is no longer met with violence, the cycle will continue to spin. In ParaNorman, we see this dynamic. The townsfolk were afraid of Agatha and her abilities, so they took deadly measures to prevent that. To their own detriment, that put her on the defensive, making their fears true. That outcome wasn't confirmed, yet they were the ones who predestined it. Through the process of fighting what they believed to be frightening, they ended up regretting it for the rest of their lives. Zombie pun. You see this happen every time violence is used against violence. Do you remember in math class when we were taught a negative plus a negative is still a negative? That also rings true here. If you only use morally wrong actions to defend against other morally wrong actions, you are still morally wrong. This was true in the 1st century, in the 17th century, like with Agatha, and it is true today. There is a way to break this cycle, but that isn't something our current culture is willing to do. Our first gut reaction to someone harming us is almost universal: to defend ourselves at any and all cost. This is because our instincts as humans usually operate as self-preservation. You see a car coming while you're crossing the road, you do everything in your power to get out of the way. It works the same way with people. We attack people back, not out of hatred, but out of fear of getting hurt. It is the exact same reason the person was hurting you in the first place. This is something that is really hard to get rid of, but it is possible. Instead of retaliation, we need to have understanding. I'm not saying you need to forgive someone who wronged you, but at least try to contextualize why they did it. Think from their perspective, and you are a lot less likely to harm them back. This requires the most basics of human empathy, understanding that the person is in fact a human. They have to eat, they have to breathe, and they need water just like you. They are no different from you in a biological context, so treat them as such. This is the hardest thing for humans to do. We see those who aren't like us as way more different than they are the same. If we stop dividing people into categories, we could probably see the humanity in people a lot more than we currently do. This is the exact thing we see Norman doing towards the end of ParaNorman. He understands that his attackers are simply human just like him, so he treats them like it. Now that we have defined the cycle, let's apply it to the town. The town is the start of the cycle in the movie. We see them persecute Agatha, and in turn she persecutes the town. The cycle is moving around these characters in a way that is predictable, but still tragic. It's not solving anything to retaliate, just passing the hurt to someone else. It wasn't fair back then, and it isn't fair now. Before we understand how the cycle affects our main characters, let's look at the town. I don't believe the town to simply be a setting, but a unique character to the story. It isn't a personal character as Norman or Neil is, but it is a collective of characters that act in unison. The entire identity of Blythe Hollow is built around one thing: the legend of the witch's curse. They have places that are witch-themed, and they even host school plays about the witch's curse around Halloween. They are profiting off of it through merchandise and tourist destinations. The town celebrates the demise of the witch without knowing who she was or even what she did. To them, it doesn't actually matter who or what she was. They were scared of her and failed to see past it. They monetized their hatred for her, and for 300 years failed to dig their way out of this blissful ignorance. They built their entire town identity on the hanging of an 11-year-old girl and saw it as a meaningful tradition. One thing we must understand about the townspeople is that they are not evil individuals. They're your average bus driver, math teacher, and electrician. They are normal people with normal lives. The whole mentality of the town changes, however, when zombies arrive. Out of fear and panic, they all start to arm themselves out of defense, not hatred for the zombies. When fear is a factor in a community, it isn't uncommon for a mob mentality to take over. It becomes an echo chamber of violence, even if the threat is overstated. In the heat of the moment, no one stepped back to think critically through the situation. If they had, they would have noticed that the zombies weren't actually attacking anyone, just roaming around town. This mirrors several other mobs, with one specific example in my mind. During the French Revolution, the Jacobins started the Reign of Terror. They were killing everyone who was opposed to them. They were so paranoid that everyone who wasn't publicly with them were against them, that they took countless lives with no point in sight. In historical mobs, we see people lose all common sense because they are forced into fight-or-flight mode. Unfortunately for our main characters in ParaNorman, the mob picked fight. It took next to nothing for the town to turn into a mob, which is the whole point. They saw something that was different and they couldn't explain it, so they tried to kill it. Unfortunately for Blythe Hollow, this behavior isn't new, but learned through generations. All of this begs the question, where did this begin? It began when Agatha was condemned to death. Just like how our townspeople are, the judges were scared, normal people. We get evidence of this from the zombies' words to Norman. It's interesting that the movie decided to turn them into zombies, effectively making them monsters. While they were alive, however, that was not the case. They weren't monsters, just scared people who did some horrible things. No one should be defined purely by their worst mistakes, including the judges. The reason they condemned her was simple. They didn't understand her gift. Like Norman, Agatha was able to speak to the dead. This made the people around her think she was a witch, which was punishable by death at the time. Out of ignorance and lack of willingness to learn, they killed her for this. I'm not saying that this action was not absolutely wrong and horrible, but is not something that someone should forever live with. Everyone messes up, and it takes a strong person to forgive people for their mess-ups. Even though the judges believed what they were doing was right, it was an outer coating of justice, guarding a center of fear. The trial of Agatha is where the movie truly begins, and the genesis of this cycle. When it comes to this seemingly never-ending cycle, it doesn't come out of thin air. There is always an event that starts it, and it usually comes from someone in authority. In ParaNorman, that person in authority was the main judge. He had the power to condemn Agatha, and he used it. When this authority is used, it makes ordinary people fear what it is being used against, that being Agatha. Without this authority sanctioning the fear of the town, it would stay silent. The authority isn't creating this opinion in the town, but it is weaponizing it. When we first meet the townspeople in the film, we notice something about them. They are keeping the fear and lies of the judges alive in the present. It wasn't a cycle that they started themselves, but one they spin nonetheless. They have merchandise about the witch's curse, which is keeping the legend alive. They didn't start this bigotry, they inherited it. Even though they didn't start it, they are just as complicit in it as the people who did. Most of them don't actively hate the witch, but they are keeping her pain alive, almost immortalized into the modern era. For the most part, the townspeople don't even know who Agatha is or was. All they know is that there is a curse from the witch, and they indulge into that legend. It is a passive acceptance of the past that plagues the hearts of the town, which is still bigotry. It's still wrong for a town to celebrate a legacy that is riddled with wrongdoing. It is very different from celebrating certain aspects of things, however. Take Thomas Jefferson, for example. We can celebrate his presidency and his intellect, because he was extremely good for our country. We cannot celebrate him as a person, because he was a massive slave owner. The townspeople, however, celebrate the murder of an innocent girl through the indulgence and monetization of her legend. When it comes to bigots around the world, most of them are not active, they are passive. It's more on the lines of silently treating someone differently rather than actively trying to kill them. This is the far more dangerous version of bigotry, and it is what keeps the cycle going in between violence. The quiet kind is what keeps people alienated through different generations, before it inevitably bubbles over and pops into a conflict. The town's bigotry is the exact kind that is building up that pressure. They currently thrive around the theme of the witch, which is keeping her in a box of expectations. Everyone sees the witch statue and thinks of the person who cursed the whole town. It's this celebration of the witch's curse that is keeping her the monster in people's minds. In the real world, this happens all of the time. A group of people are put in a box, and as a nation, we don't ever question it. We aren't the ones who are dividing the people, but we are definitely the ones who keep them divided. The cycle was not started at the beginning of the film, but has been saturating over hundreds of years. Agatha was put through a lot of pain by the judges, and that pain was put on full display. They boil her down to a fairy tale in their town, and benefit from her name. She didn't start the cycle, she was its first victim. Even though she was the victim, she was also the very one to keep that cycle alive and well. Before we look into how her trial affected her, let's look at who Agatha actually is. The most shocking detail about her is how old she is. She is 11 years old when she is put to death. This puts a different perspective on her that was lacking in the first half of the film. She wasn't a monster who wanted to kill a bunch of people, but a child who was scared. She was persecuted by the judges because she shared a character trait with Norman, that being the ability to see the dead. This made her different from everyone else, and no one tried to get to know her. What she truly needed was someone who got to know the real her, not what the outside portrayed. Instead of that, she was met with a noose. Her story is the most tragic in the whole movie, and that is on purpose. The movie is showing us the real her, instead of the monster the town sees her as. She wasn't a witch who wanted to curse anyone, just a scared 11-year-old. Although we don't see her mom in the film, we learn a few things about her. From what Agatha told Norman at her grave, her mom was her source of love. Without her mom, she would be completely isolated. We learn that during her trial, Agatha was fully separated from her mom. Her entire world, gone in less than an instant. She was now fully alone and susceptible to the pain that was coming to her. Without her mom, there was no love to protect her from the harm of the judges. She had to sit there and take it while they berated her and then eventually hanged her. This turned her into a balloon with ever-flowing air, on the verge of popping. Even though he was never persecuted to this level, Norman is pretty similar to Agatha. They both are outcasts because of their abilities. Like Agatha, Norman doesn't have many people who like to hang around him. They find him as the weird kid because he's always saying he's talking to someone who is dead. This makes them loners alike, but with one key difference. Norman still has unconditional love in his life. His mom is his biggest supporter and loves him no matter what. It is this unconditional love that shields him from developing a further hatred for those who hurt him. If only Agatha was able to keep her source of love in her life, she might have ended up in a different place entirely. Agatha had every right to hurt, and that is a non-negotiable. She was torn from her home at the age of 11, never to see her family again. She was put on a trial in front of judges who wanted her executed, and they succeeded. She had anger building up within her that she didn't exactly know what to do with. Please note that this essay is not about invalidating her pain. Her emotions are infinitely valid in this instance, and we need to acknowledge that. Agatha has gone through more at the age of 11 than the common adult. If the average person's pain is valid for something that is less impactful, then she definitely owns a right to her own pain. There is no way around that. If you ever hear someone say that it's not okay to be hurt, then you need to respectfully tell them they're wrong. Pain is a human universal, and the only real thing guaranteed in this life. When it comes to Agatha, she is more than welcome to her pain because of what she experienced, and anyone who says otherwise is diminishing the murder of an 11-year-old. She is valid in her pain, of course, but she is not valid with what she does with it. When it comes to Agatha, you can't really talk about her character without the witch's curse. In the process of protecting herself from the persecution, she became the persecutor herself. In the motion of stopping the judges from hurting her, she lashed out in an unhealthy way. She cursed the judges to resurrect from the grave as zombies every year on the same day. She went from the condemned to a judge with the gavel herself. It did not have the effect she was hoping for. Instead of them not hurting her, it only kept her in her pain almost eternally. The cycle did not break because of her, but only dwarfed its original size. She provided the needed fuel to keep it running for many generations after she had passed on. She made the decision to lash back at them, which only ended up prolonging her suffering. The real tragedy of Agatha is not the fact that she was executed, but the fact she could have ended the cycle with her. If she had left it alone, she would have died, and that's horrible. But she would have been able to rest easy and not suffer in death either. She has been placed into a box that continued her suffering, but she was the builder herself. When Agatha retaliated, she did so in a special way. She didn't just choose a single time to hurt those who hurt her. Rather, she made the conscious decision to keep her vengeance alive for 300 years. By doing so, there is no growth within her. She is inside the halls of her own furious mind, and it only reaffirms why she is keeping the curse active. The curse of her own making is the same thing keeping her suffering for the entire duration of her death up until the end of the movie. She couldn't let go of her own pain, which only kindled the fire of her rage. It's because of this lack of moving on that prevented her from moving on. Not anything that the townspeople or even the judges did. She thought that she was hurting those who wronged her, but she only ended up hurting herself in that process. She was imprisoned, and yet she was the warden of her own prison. We can see this in the real world with people who don't move on and hold grudges. It is so important to move on from wrongdoing, or else you can end up like Agatha, trapped within your own hurt. You aren't free if you currently have a grudge. Your free will is tethered to anger. Agatha was deprived of the most important thing for our well-being, and it cost her dearly. It's very easy for people to misinterpret what we need when we are in pain. We don't need a knight in shining armor to fight our battles for us. We don't need justice either. We don't need someone to grow the fire of anger within us. We need someone who pulls us away from all of it. What she really needed was simple. She needed someone who saw her as a human being and loved her for it. She needed unconditional love. She finally receives that in Norman. Instead of hurting her for harming people, he looks beyond her rage. He empathizes with her without validating her actions. He doesn't see a monster, but a scared little girl. Norman was able to calm her down out of her witch form and was able to talk to her like she's a person. This was finally the action that was able to let her rest. In order to relieve her of her pain, Agatha needed a Norman, needed someone who showed her the kindness of a human. Norman was able to break through to her because he saw the humanity in her behind her wickedness. This worked because Norman refused to continue the cycle. He very easily could have hurt Agatha for the injustices she committed, but he didn't. He made a conscious decision to help her even when he saw her as a bully. It's interesting to see that Norman is the only person in the whole movie who was able to do this. It's because of who he is and how he was raised, unlike those around him. When we first meet Norman, we get a pretty good sense of the kind of kid he is. We see him talking to all of the dead that are around him. He's kind to them and all around a decent kid. When we first see him interacting with the living, however, we see that he has been alienated. He is bullied and all around the weird kid in town. He is isolated from every person his own age, except those who are also isolated. The decision was made with this movie to have the main character be the most ordinary weird person. Other than his gift, Norman is no way different than other people. He likes horror movies. Lots of other people do also. There's nothing about Norman that makes him different. He's like any other person, like you or I. It really shows that it only takes one thing that isn't like the rest of people that will turn you into the weird kid. His gift isn't what makes him special, however. It's how he manages his pain, that is. Since he has always been an outsider, I don't believe he was ever inside of the cycle. This doesn't mean that it doesn't affect him, just that he isn't a contributing member. He was never involved in the mob mentality of retaliation, simply because he was never allowed in the mob. When it comes to the division of a society, you have to actually participate in it to be of that mindset. Norman was never indoctrinated with this belief and action system because he was never a part of the community that endorsed it. This gave him a unique perspective throughout the whole movie. When he first came in contact with the zombies, he was on the verge of entering the cycle. He threw things at them out of self-preservation and protection. But since this mentality wasn't actually a part of him, he slowed down and allowed the vignette of his sight to be lifted. He saw the zombies for who they were, people who messed up. He's able to see the dead, meaning he sees things that everyone else doesn't. It is his perspective that makes him have a true understanding of the town. No one respects him because of this gift, except his mom, of course. Norman and Agatha are very similar in these ways, but with very different outcomes. The biggest difference between them, like stated before, is that Norman had his mom with him. Agatha was ripped away from her mom, and from any form of love in that manner. Since Norman had that love the entire time, he stayed level-headed and was able to extend that love to others. His mom was always there to love him, even when she didn't understand his gift. She never treated him differently because of it, and still loved him as her child. This was the exact framework Norman needed to be able to break this cycle. He learned love is truly unconditional, and should be given freely to everyone, regardless of who they are and what they have done. The reason Agatha was unable to extend this love to others was because she was shunned from it. You can only extend to others what you have been given yourself. Without that love from his mother, Norman would become like Agatha. Not 11-year-old persecuted Agatha, but the witch, who has been in a resentful box of injustice for 300 years. But with that love, he becomes the hero of the story, but through words and love, not through violence and fighting. In the grand scheme of his story, Norman is the revolutionary. A common misconception about revolutionaries is that they revolt through violence. That is not the type of revolutionary that Norman appears to be. He revolts against the ideals and traditions of his town through how he acts towards others. It's not about how the outward action from the body, however, but the mind. It all comes from the internal revolt of the concept of treating a person lesser than human. This is the kind of silent revolution that gets no awards. This makes it the hardest kind of revolution to enact because the sacrifice is very real. You have to sit there knowing there is no justice for the wrongdoing against you, and you have to be okay with that. No one celebrates this kind of revolution because of how radical of an idea it is. We have lost so much empathy in our culture that it is unheard of to extend love to those who are opposed to you. Unfortunately, this is the only way to break the cycle. The reason no one breaks it, it's too hard for people to do. We get filled with so much anger as a society that it is next to impossible to love those causing us harm. But when the time comes to choose what to do, Norman chose love. During the climax of the movie, we see the final battle that decides the fate of the town. The battle isn't Norman versus Agatha, however. It's the cycle versus Norman. The version of Agatha we see during this battle isn't actually her, but it's the witch. It is the corrupt nature of the once sweet little girl. When Norman is faced against the cycle, he doesn't fight it. He sees through it. The cycle is like a hurricane, a never-ending rotation of walls that would evaporate your body. What Norman does in this scene is what defines the whole movie. He steps through the walls into the eye of the hurricane. Inside the eye of a hurricane is the most calm part of the hurricane for just a moment. Norman breaks through Agatha's walls of anger to access the truth from her, an 11-year-old girl. That's her true form. He only gets there through talking to her, making her realize who she actually is, not who she has been conditioned to be. He does this all without harming her or condemning her, causing her to drop the barriers that were once preventing her from passing on. He extends the same understanding to her that he has received his entire life from his mother, an act that ultimately saves everyone and breaks the cycle. Some see it as weak to remain defenseless, but it is the most powerful thing you can do. It takes a special person to meet your enemies with love, and it will cost you dearly. Just because it costs you something, it is still the right thing to do regardless. Although Norman was able to break the cycle, it was not easy for him. Emotionally speaking, he lost during this confrontation. When you decide to break the cycle, you have a huge burden to bear. In the end, Norman didn't get rid of Agatha's pain, he absorbed it. He saw all the pain that she had inside of her, and he didn't run from it. He helped her carry it instead. That is the real cost of having genuine empathy for another person. Lifting them up while taking their burdens on as your own. We see all of the main characters exhibit this alongside Norman. His sister stands up for him. Neil was always by his side, regardless of how many people see him because of it. Mitch lacks understanding of the situation, but was still a team player when it came down to it. Most importantly, We see the bully character have some humanity towards the end of this film. The boy who had caused Norman the majority of his pain, extending him understanding as Norman did Agatha. When we first see Alvin, we think we already know exactly what kind of person he is. We see a bully who hurts Norman because Norman is different. This is not the case, however. Alvin is not just a one-dimensional villain who is evil just to be evil. He doesn't bully Norman out of hate, but lack of understanding. Norman is the kid who is always talking about dead people, and Alvin doesn't know what to do with that, so he lashes out against it. This is the exact same reason that the judges persecuted Agatha, because they didn't understand her. They were scared. This is another form of the cycle, but on a smaller scale. Someone treating someone else wrongly because they don't understand them. Everyone should relate to Alvin because we have all done it. We all haven't bullied someone, but we treated someone differently due to not understanding. And just like all of us, Alvin is a human, and we get to see that in the film. Alvin isn't the villain in the story, but the most realistic person we see. We get a moment with Alvin and Norman that puts Alvin into perspective. Norman ruins Alvin's chance with a girl by accident, so Alvin steals the book Norman has to read to the witch. Since this prevents Norman from stopping the curse, zombies rise in front of the two boys. This makes Alvin outwardly scared for the first time in the movie. This reframes his entire character. Instead of the big bully who treats others poorly out of hatred like before, we now see a scared kid who doesn't know how to handle that. He's just like everyone else. Most people don't know how to handle being scared, so we lash out just like Alvin does. I have done this, and so have you. The whole concept of this movie can be found within Alvin's character. Fear disguised as cruelty. The actions Alvin commit are indeed cruel, but that doesn't make him cruel. In real life, this is how most bullies operate. They hurt what they are scared of, and it creates a bad cycle for everyone involved. All it takes for Alvin to get out of this cycle of his creation is to see Norman as a person. Through helping Norman, he sees the humanity in Norman, finally breaking the mini-cycle. It was never Alvin versus Norman, but the cycle versus both of them. Although Alvin's cycle is a lot smaller than Agatha's, it is virtually the same. There is no limit to how big or small the cycle is. It could be a school-wide cycle like Alvin's, a town-wide one like Agatha's, but it can grow even bigger than that if not handled. What the movie ParaNorman is showcasing is happening everywhere around the world currently. A cycle of harm to one another, and we need to stop it. Unfortunately, we live in nations that are not willing to have that conversation necessary to stop it. Although ParaNorman is a fictional story, the concepts within it sadly are not. Blythe Hollow is not a real town, but there are certainly real towns like it. On the surface, the movie is pretty simple. A boy who sees the dead has to confront a girl who sees the dead to stop her curse on people. When you dig deeper, however, it is commentary on how our culture has been moving lately. The movie makes a point to highlight what it feels like to be in pain. Unfortunately, we handle pain similarly to how they did in the movie. The cycle in the movie is a direct parallel to the cycle in real life. People's response to getting hurt is usually the same. Hurt others regardless of if they were the ones who hurt you. This movie came out in 2012, but it is more relevant to our culture now, today, than that of 2012. The reason the themes of this movie resonate with people is because they see it in their own lives. In our lives, we see an equivalent to the trials depicted in ParaNorman. Since the internet became popular, people have gotten way too comfortable being hateful to other people. You see in comment sections people making fun of anyone and everyone for anything that they deem a good reason. We also see cancel culture being the biggest cycle in our current society. someone does something that is wrong, they lose everything. Most people who are a victim of this can't even get a job because of something that they did. The goal of cancel culture has never been to reform people, it's actually the opposite. They keep people from growing. We need to change the narrative from, they can never change, to, we need to help them change. The speed of which people have turned against celebrities that they once loved is the exact reason they are identical to the townspeople. The internet can be a huge echo chamber, so if one person gets mad, it turns into a mob of people against someone. Nobody gives time to ask questions about the accused, they just react to it. We are divided because of this, but the division isn't actually our fault. The thing most people don't realize about division is that it ceases to exist unless it is constantly being fed. If there was no one to tell you to hate a certain person based on particular criteria, you wouldn't. On a national level, the root of this is our political system. Right now, politicians are banking on us being divided. They spread false information about both political parties to keep us at war with each other instead of them. Just like the town, we are conditioned to fear the people who aren't like us, whether that be because of politics, religion, race, culture, or even class. We are taught from an early age to stick with our own kind and to treat other kinds differently. Ordinary people are the exact same as the townspeople. This is not a division that we started, but we will forever live within it. It's easier to go after someone you can actually harm, rather than the actual people you should be going after. Politicians can't be harmed by us, but the average person can be. By not attacking the evil rhetoric of those in power, we will forever attack one another. This is the complete wrong way to go about things, with little change in sight. In our current culture, it is normalized and even applauded to meet hatred with hatred. This is not justice by any means, but people treat it as such. We get so internally worked up and heated that it erupts out, burning everyone around us. When it comes to the cycle, we are actively feeding it. If we keep retaliating against wrongdoings, then we only stir the pot, and we harm everyone in the process. It might feel right while the actions are being committed, but the effects of it prove that it isn't righteous. When it comes to culture, it's most important that people within the same society get along. When you have people getting death threats and being name-called for their political views, we clearly are failing heavily to do that. Because of this division, more Agathas are alive today than Normans. There's way too many people who jump at the chance to wrong their aggressors, and not enough people who move on from the wrongdoing and build a better future for themselves. The cost of this division is clear. We lose our identities into the fire of hatred. There is only one way to move on from this, and it is modeled by Norman. Norman is the kind of character who should be a role model for all of us, even if it doesn't seem like it at first. We learn through the events of the movie that Norman is a revolutionary, and he fights for what is right. He chooses empathy over retaliation, which is counter to the cultural perspective. When someone says to hit back, Norman says to be kind and to never hit someone. This doesn't mean accepting wrongdoing, only offering understanding and not shunning people because of it. He never excused Agatha for the actions she committed. Instead, he offered her love in spite of it. This is the exact standard the film is correctly stating we fail at. We don't live up to that standard because of this division. Until we decide to unite, we will still be in this cycle. In 2012, ParaNorman was able to talk about things that we refuse in our day and age. The movie is making a bold claim. It is not okay to retaliate against wrongdoing. It is until we accept that claim in the year 2026, we will remain forever divided. In the movie ParaNorman, we see a very interesting character dynamic. Agatha, who is marinating inside of her pain and loss, and Norman, who refuses to conform to the notion of retaliation. In the end, only Norman was able to get through to her. He saved the day, not through violence, but through words. She's finally able to rest, and it was because of an act of kindness. The world that Norman returns to isn't perfect, but a brighter one. The cycle has been broken, meaning people can understand one another again. If we strive for this ourselves, perhaps our world would become a brighter one as well. This is a personal story, because we have all had to deal with this dilemma. Those who know me in real life know this, but I would like to tell you all as well. I have been through so much hurt in my 19 years of life so far. From depression and anxiety, to being assaulted, and even being slandered. I sat inside of this for years, and I hated everyone and everything that caused it. It wasn't until I was able to let go of everything that I finally started living my life. I picked empathy, not violence. It was the greatest decision I have made, and I hope everyone picks it also. If you face this decision, pick wisely. I wish everyone who has made it to the end of my essay will rewatch ParaNorman in this light. Look around for cycles within your own life, and ask yourself how you can break them. Know that you can be hurting without lashing out at others. It is okay to feel pain. That is a human quality we all have. But it is not okay to hurt others because of it. Thank you all for watching my video. Feel free to leave a like, comment, and a subscribe if you would like to support me. It means a lot. Let me know your thoughts on my argument and if you believe I got anything wrong. Keep the dialogue respectful, and we can continue to have this fruitful conversation. Before you leave, I would like to leave you with this. If a hurricane is coming towards you, don't run from it. Walk to the eye of it and hold on. It will pass only if you let it, so let it. Most people don't last long within the eye of a hurricane, so become the person who vaporizes it. Thank you.